The time has come. I have never mentioned this before, but the real reason I started the whole retro computing thing was because I wanted to play old games. Basically, I started the whole thing in the hopes that I will find parts for free to build me an old computer to play old games.
And after all this time, I've gathered more than enough parts to build the retro battleship of my dreams.
Funnily enough, I will start with a part I'm not going to be using. This motherboard, in fact. This is a 462 socket motherboard for Athlon processors. I thought I should make an Athlon build, but since I do not have a 1000 MHz Athlon, that means I have to buy it. And buying it kinda defeats the point of this whole video, which is to build this computer from parts I acquired for free. This is what I'm going to be using instead, a QDI motherboard, and much like all other motherboards, it has an unpronounceable name. Anyway, it's what we need, it's freshly recapped, it has a PGA 370 socket, AGP slot, plenty of PCI slots, and even an ISA slot in case we want to install any old components. Now you're probably wondering why there's so many sticks of RAM here. Well, let's just start by saying that each one is 256 megabytes, and yes, I will be using that amount. Now, the reason I have so many here is because I don't know if they work, so I will be using one of them, and if that doesn't work, I will swap it out. So, instead of showing you one that could potentially be broken, I'm showing you all of them. So that's just about the RAM. Our hard disk is this Western Digital, which is 80 gigabytes, which I think it's plenty enough to fit all my games. As for a DVD drive, I will use whatever works because I have many and some of them do not work. And here we have our brain, the Pentium 3 1000, which, if you couldn't tell by the name, it's 1000 megahertz. It came out in 2000 and it's 1 year short of a totally period accurate computer. Now we are going to need sound, and although the motherboard I've chosen already has a sound chip on it, I would like to use this instead. Of course, all of you recognize what this is. This is a Sound Blaster Live, which at the time was the graphics card.
Yeah, I said graphics card. Silly me. The whole live thing is not really my strong suit yet. Yada yada yada. I had to acknowledge this. Whatever, let's go back to the video.
To go with if you wanted the perfect sound. And that's just about it with the sound card. Let's move to the graphics card. And this is the star of the show, the Voodoo3 2000. Now, I know it looks a bit different, and that's because I changed the cooler. Because these cards were known to have inadequate cooling, they subsequently ran hot, and then they died because of it. They had short lifespans. So what I did was remove the old piece of metal it had for a heatsink. I scraped the glue, which was very difficult to do, and then reattached these using thermal adhesive pads. And I did all that while I was afraid I'm gonna kill my card. Fortunately, I've run some tests, and this works, so I'm glad, and I'm free to proceed. Of course, we need a case to put all these things inside, and this is what I'm going to be using. Now, if you've seen any of my salvage videos, you'll know that this is from a salvaged computer. And of course, may I remind you that all the parts I will be using in this video are salvaged, and they cost me nothing. So now that we've seen most of our parts, let's get down to business.
My retro bottle station is finally complete. So what now? Well, I have an idea.
I'm installing game using diskettes. I haven't done this in since the 90s. Damn.
After many trials and tribulations trying to set up this computer, it's time to finalize it and give it its rightful place on my desk. For the monitor, I have this Flatron from LG, which hails from more than 15 years ago. It will do just fine. And here we have a steel ball PS2 mouse, which I bought brand new. Apparently, they still manufacture those. Now, just to be clear, I don't include peripherals into the whole free parts thing. And this mouse also fits quite nicely with the whole setup, and it works much better than the black laser one I have. And here we have the keyboard, which, yes, it's salvaged too. So, we're going to need sound. For this purpose, I drove for an hour to buy these. The Cambridge Soundworks 2.1 sound system. After I figured out the connections, it was finally time to put it in place. Due to lack of space, I decided to place the subwoofer on top of the computer. And of course, the satellites will go at either side of the monitor. And so the time has finally come to try out some games and see how they run. All the games I'm gonna be testing are from 99 and onwards. Yes, unfortunately I have to be recording my monitor with my phone since I do not have a fancy capture card. I also couldn't get Fraps to show me the frame rate counter on most games, so we will just go by feel. Besides, I'm not the number crunching type of guy, and also I do not have much experience in the whole benchmarking thing. As you can see, we're starting off with Descent 3, a favorite of mine that came out in 1999. Unfortunately, the capture is done at 30 frames per second, so you can't really tell by looking at it, but the game runs at like 60 or around 60 frames per second, while all graphical settings are set to maximum and the resolution is at 800 by 600, which is the ideal resolution for the Voodoo 3 2000. Unfortunately, at points you can see that lack of 32-bit support. Now, running the game at 2024 by 768 resolution, it still ran pretty acceptably, although I noticed some rather weird stuttering. The next game is Star Lancer from 2000, and I can tell you I can't get over how good it still looks and how satisfying it is to play. With everything set at max and the resolution at 800 by 600, it's more than smooth, although I noticed some stuttering here and there, especially if I flew through debris fields of destroyed enemies. Also, the 16-bit limitations are not as pronounced here as they were in other games. Next up, we have Battle Isle, The Andosia War. This game came out in 2001 and unfortunately this is reflected to the performance, which is not very good. Even at the lowest settings, the game stutters a lot and it runs at sub 30 FPS. Strangely, we used to have a 500 MHz Pentium 3 with a Riva TNT, and I remember this game running quite well on that. Then again, I might misremembering it because I was far too young. For some reason, Thief 2 was the only game in which fraps worked. At 800 by 600 and everything at max, I'm getting 38 FPS outside and around 76 inside, which makes for a very smooth experience, while the game still looks very good. I tried 1024 resolution, but I was getting sub 30 FPS outside, and I wasn't having that. I dropped the resolution immediately.
Damn torches, always sputtering out.
Well, don't just make tab over it. Light it up.
Unfortunately, MDK2 gave me quite the uneven performance. It was very stuttery, and as you can see in the in-game benchmark, the frame rate jumps up or down constantly. Even when I tried lowering the graphics, the problems with the performance still existed, although less pronounced. I can tell you right now, Jane's USAF requires a joystick to properly play, and fortunately, I have two. But I digress. This game runs like a dream. There was occasional stuttering here and there, but generally it runs great. A+. Hitman Agent 47 ran very well at 800 by 600. If I tried to raise the resolution, it would stutter and drop frame rate. Something that's very apparent in this game is the lack of 32-bit support by the Voodoo 3. The rainbowing effect on walls and dark areas is very pronounced in this game, and I have to say I'm kinda disappointed. Otherwise, the game runs very smoothly without any stuttering. There's not much to say about Free Space 2. It runs great in all options, and that's just about it.
Alpha and Beta wings, you are now to engage and destroy the Anchor.
Deus Ex is the last game I'm testing. Overall, it was a decent performer, though in some exterior spaces it did chug a bit. There's also the issue with the 60-bit coloring, because it's dark, it's very obvious, and you can't help but notice it. It seems like games from 2000 were really made with 32 bits in mind. And it was in these games that the lack of 32-bit support was more obvious. So let's get down to my final thoughts. This rig is basically the first proper retro build I've done, and I had to overcome a lot of hurdles, and I mean a lot of them. I had problems installing Windows, I had problems with sound drivers, and I had problems with DOS games. Even now, having finalized the system, there are still DOS games I couldn't yet run. I would be lying to you if I said that I wasn't discouraged to continue with its problem, but with its problem fixed, I was getting encouraged to continue. So now let's get technical. Performance-wise, in some later games, it's a bit iffy, but overall it's great. The Pentium 3 1000 is very good. In fact, it's too good. In some games I'm getting sped up menus, but this is small fish. What leaves me personally mixed is the Voodoo 3. The aforementioned great performance has its caveats. For the performance to be consistent, you need to be playing at 800 by 600. 1024 by 768 is doable, but you will be getting a lot of slowdowns. Also, the lack of 32-bit support is very obvious in games from 2000 and later. But in glide supporting games, the performance is unparalleled. All in all, I'm very halfway there with the Voodoo 3. Unless you want the hyper-specific glide support, I would advise you not to get one and go with something else. And so, a video that took me like a month, give or take, to complete has come to a close. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed yourselves here, and I hope to see you again soon. This has been Retro Amateur. Thanks for watching.